12 minutes can change the story you tell yourself for the rest of your life. And I learned that on an ordinary Tuesday when I walked into the lobby of my office building expecting nothing more exciting than stale coffee and another stack of client files. My name is Ethan Carter, and until that morning I believed that keeping my head down, working hard, and treating people with respect was enough to build a good life. It turns out that sometimes the biggest test of your character arrives long before anyone notices your success. The elevator doors opened to a crowd of coworkers gathered around the reception desk, their voices low enough to sound polite, but loud enough to make it obvious that everyone wanted to hear every word. Standing in the center of the room was Daniel Brooks, one of the company's top sales managers, wearing the confident smile that always seemed just a little too rehearsed. He looked at me the moment I stepped inside, almost as if he had been waiting for an audience before beginning the performance. "Perfect timing," he said with a grin that invited everyone else to laugh before he had even finished speaking. "Maybe Ethan can explain why the numbers on this proposal make absolutely no sense." A few people glanced toward me, then toward the printed report in Daniel's hand. I had prepared that proposal over the weekend, checking every figure twice before sending it for review. My heartbeat quickened, not because I doubted my work, but because I recognized something more dangerous than a simple mistake. Daniel wasn't asking a question. He was telling a story, and he had already decided who the villain would be. I walked closer, accepted the papers he held out, and quietly scanned the pages. Within seconds I noticed that several figures had been changed. Entire sections were different from the version I had submitted. Instead of accusing anyone, I simply looked up and said, "These aren't the numbers I sent." Daniel shrugged with theatrical disappointment. Funny how people always say that after they're caught. A few uncomfortable laughs echoed through the lobby. Others avoided eye contact altogether, choosing the safety of silence over the risk of speaking up. I could have argued. I could have raised my voice. Instead, I folded the papers carefully and thanked him for bringing them to my attention. That answer seemed to confuse him more than any angry response ever could. As I walked toward my desk, I heard whispers behind me, but I also noticed something else. Melissa, one of the newer analysts, gave me a brief nod before returning to her computer. It lasted less than a second, yet it reminded me that not everyone believed the loudest version of the truth. The rest of the morning passed slowly. Emails arrived, meetings came and went, and nobody mentioned the incident directly. Still, I could feel the weight of curious looks whenever I crossed the office. Reputation has a strange way of shifting before facts have the chance to catch up. Around lunchtime, my supervisor, Karen Mitchell, asked if I had a few minutes to talk. She wasn't angry. If anything, she seemed unusually thoughtful. She closed the conference room door, placed the altered proposal on the table, and asked a simple question. "Can you walk me through exactly what happened?" There was no accusation in her voice, only curiosity. I opened my laptop, logged into the document archive, and pulled up every saved revision, complete with timestamps. One by one, we compared the original files with the printed copy Daniel had displayed downstairs. Karen's expression changed almost immediately. She leaned closer to the screen, studying the revision history with careful attention. "These edits weren't made from your account," she said quietly. I nodded. That's why I didn't argue in the lobby. I knew the records would speak more clearly than I could. For the first time that day, the room fell completely silent, not with embarrassment, but with possibility. Karen thanked me for remaining professional and said she needed time to review everything before drawing conclusions. As I left the conference room, I realized something important. Winning an argument in public might satisfy your pride for a moment, but letting the truth unfold at the right time often changes far more than a single conversation. I didn't know it yet, but that decision to stay calm was about to uncover a chain of events that would reach far beyond one altered proposal. And before the week was over, everyone in the office would discover that first impressions can be manufactured, but evidence has a way of waiting patiently until the perfect moment to be seen. The afternoon settled over the office with the strange stillness that follows an uncomfortable moment everyone pretends has already been forgotten. From my desk, I answered emails, reviewed contracts, and returned phone calls with the same steady pace I always had, but every so often I caught someone glancing in my direction before quickly looking away. Rumors travel faster than facts because they ask nothing from the listener except curiosity. Facts demand patience, and patience is becoming a rare habit. Around 3 o'clock, Melissa stopped beside my desk, carrying a folder she clearly did not need to deliver in person. She waited until the nearby conversations faded before speaking quietly. I probably should not be saying this, but I think you deserve to know something. I looked up from my monitor and thanked her for trusting me. She glanced toward Daniel's office, lowered her voice even more, and said, "Yesterday evening I stayed late to finish the quarterly reports. I saw Daniel using the printer in the executive workroom. I did not think anything about it at the time, but he had a copy of your proposal with him." She quickly added that she had no idea what he had been doing and did not want to accuse anyone unfairly. I appreciated that. Assumptions had already caused enough damage. "Thank you," I said. "Even if it ends up meaning nothing, it helps establish the timeline." She smiled with visible relief, almost grateful that I had not asked her to take sides. After she walked away, I opened the company's document management system again. Every revision left a digital trail, but access permissions meant only a few people could modify finalized proposals. I made careful notes without copying confidential information, simply organizing the sequence of events in case Karen requested additional details. Late that afternoon, my inbox chimed with a calendar invitation from Karen for 9 o'clock the following morning. The meeting included me, Daniel, and someone from the information technology department named Ryan Foster. That single addition caught my attention immediately. If information technology was involved, they were not relying on opinions anymore. They were checking system records. Across the office, Daniel appeared as relaxed as ever. He joked with coworkers, spoke confidently during a sales call, and even laughed loudly enough for half the floor to hear. Confidence can be genuine, but sometimes it is simply another performance designed to discourage questions. As I packed my laptop at the end of the day, Daniel walked past my desk and stopped just long enough to offer a smile that never reached his eyes. "Hope tomorrow goes better for you," he said. "People remember mistakes." I met his gaze without raising my voice. They also remember honesty. For a fraction of a second, his expression changed. It was subtle, almost impossible to notice unless someone was looking for it, but the certainty behind his smile seemed to weaken before he continued toward the elevator. That evening, I drove home through light traffic, passing familiar neighborhoods where children played basketball in driveways and families walked their dogs beneath the warm evening sky. Normally, those simple scenes helped me leave work behind, but my thoughts kept returning to the same question. Why would someone with Daniel's reputation risk something so unnecessary? He already earned more than most managers, received recognition from senior leadership, and had every opportunity to keep succeeding. Unless success was no longer enough. Some people become so focused on staying at the top that they begin treating everyone else's progress as a personal threat. After dinner, I resisted the temptation to keep searching for answers. Instead, I went for a 2-mile walk through the park near my apartment. The fresh air cleared my thoughts. Whatever happened the next morning, I wanted to arrive with a clear mind instead of carrying frustration into the room. Before going to bed, I checked my email one final time. There was a brief message from Karen. It contained only one sentence. "Please bring your original project notes and do not discuss this meeting with anyone beforehand." That request confirmed what I had suspected. The situation had become much larger than a disagreement over one proposal. When I arrived at the office the next morning, the atmosphere felt noticeably different. Conversations stopped as people entered meeting rooms. Managers moved with unusual purpose, and Ryan from information technology was already setting up a laptop in the conference room. Karen greeted me with a calm nod, then looked toward the hallway as Daniel approached, carrying the same confident posture he had worn all week. None of us realized that within the next hour, a single overlooked system log would quietly dismantle the story that had seemed so convincing only a day earlier. Karen waited until the conference room door closed before speaking. There was no tension in her voice, only the calm professionalism that usually appeared when an important decision depended on facts instead of opinions. Ryan Foster connected his laptop to the large monitor at the end of the table and opened the document management system. Daniel leaned back comfortably in his chair with his arms folded, looking more amused than concerned. I placed my notebook on the table and remained silent. Karen looked around the room. "Thank you for being here. We are not here to assign blame. We are here to establish exactly what happened." Ryan nodded and began explaining how every finalized proposal generated an activity log that recorded account access, revision history, print requests, and file exports. Most employees never see these records because they are stored on the server, he said. They cannot be edited through normal user access. Daniel gave a small shrug. Then this should be simple. If Ethan made the changes, the records will show it. Ryan clicked through several screens before stopping at the proposal in question. The original timeline appeared first. My account had completed the final approved draft on Saturday afternoon from my home office. The document remained unchanged until Monday morning. Ryan highlighted the next entry. At 8:23 on Monday, another account accessed the file. Daniel smiled confidently. There you go. Ryan continued reading without reacting. However, the account that accessed the file did not belong to Ethan Carter. The room became noticeably quieter. Ryan enlarged the screen so everyone could read the details. A temporary administrative permission had been used to unlock the finalized proposal. Karen leaned forward. Who had authorization to use that permission? Ryan answered without hesitation. Only 3 employees. Myself, the director of operations, and Daniel Brooks, because he frequently prepares customized presentations for major clients. Daniel shifted slightly in his chair, but quickly recovered. Accessing a file does not prove anyone changed it. Correct, Ryan replied. That is why we keep reading. He opened another section of the activity log. Every revision appeared with a precise timestamp measured down to the second. Several numerical values had been altered, 1 pricing table had been replaced, and 2 approval notes had been removed before the document was printed. Ryan pointed at the user identification beside each modification. It matched the same administrative session. Karen remained composed, but her expression hardened just enough to reveal that the meeting had reached a turning point. Daniel cleared his throat. Someone could have used my computer. Ryan calmly shook his head. The edits were not made from your office computer. They were made using your company laptop after you authenticated with your security token. Silence settled over the table. Nobody rushed to fill it. Karen looked toward me. Ethan, did you have access to Daniel's security credentials? No, I answered. I have never even seen his security token. Ryan clicked once more and displayed the final log entry. After the modified version had been printed, the administrative session ended. 5 minutes later, my original file was reopened, but no further changes were made. Whoever had modified the proposal had intentionally left the original stored version untouched while printing an altered copy for public display. Karen slowly folded her hands together. That explains why. Ethan's archived file never matched the printed document. Daniel looked from Ryan to Karen before forcing a laugh that sounded noticeably thinner than the confident voice he had used the day before. There has to be some mistake in the system. Ryan answered immediately. We checked the server integrity before this meeting. The logs are verified automatically and cannot be rewritten without generating additional alerts. There were no alerts. I watched Daniel carefully. Until that moment, he had controlled every conversation simply by sounding certain. Now certainty was slipping away, replaced by hurried explanations that changed with every new piece of evidence. Karen ended the meeting without raising her voice. I will be consulting human resources and senior leadership before making any decisions. Until then, I expect complete professionalism from everyone involved. We stood and quietly gathered our belongings. As I reached the hallway, Melissa looked up from her desk with an expression that asked the question she could not say aloud. I simply gave a small, reassuring nod before returning to my office. Within an hour, the atmosphere across the entire floor had changed. Conversations became quieter, people stopped repeating yesterday's rumors, and more than one coworker avoided looking at Daniel altogether. Reputation had begun shifting again, this time in the opposite direction. Just before lunch, an email appeared in my inbox requesting my presence at an executive meeting later that afternoon, and the list of attendees included one name that had not been involved until now, the company's chief executive officer, which meant the consequences were about to reach far beyond a single proposal. The executive conference room occupied the top floor of the building, a place most employees visited only a handful of times during their careers. The walls were lined with photographs celebrating the company's biggest milestones, reminders that lasting success had always depended on trust more than talent. When I arrived, Karen was already there along with Ryan Foster and a representative from Human Resources named Linda Parker. A few moments later, the chief executive officer, Michael Reynolds, entered carrying a thin folder instead of the thick stack of documents I expected. He greeted each of us politely before taking his seat at the head of the table. Daniel arrived last. His confident stride was still there, but it had become noticeably slower. Michael looked around the room before speaking. I appreciate everyone making time for this meeting. I have reviewed the preliminary findings, but I would like to hear the sequence of events directly. Karen calmly summarized everything from the altered proposal in the lobby to the verified activity logs. Ryan explained the technical evidence once again, carefully distinguishing confirmed facts from assumptions. Linda asked several procedural questions to ensure every step had followed company policy. Throughout the discussion, I noticed something interesting. Nobody interrupted anyone. Nobody raised a voice. The search for the truth moved forward without becoming personal. When Karen finished, Michael turned toward me. Ethan, is there anything you would like to add? I thought for a moment before answering. Only one thing. I never wanted anyone to get into trouble. I only wanted the facts to be examined before conclusions were made. Michael nodded thoughtfully. That answer tells me as much about your character as the evidence tells me about the incident. Daniel leaned forward. With respect, we are acting like a computer log tells the entire story. There could still be another explanation. Michael folded his hands. Then this is the right time to provide it. For several seconds, Daniel remained silent. He spoke about pressure from upcoming sales targets, about managing multiple projects, and about how stressful the previous week had been. Yet none of those explanations addressed the specific evidence already presented. Finally, he admitted that he had opened the proposal before Monday's meeting, but insisted he only wanted to review it. Ryan quietly responded by displaying another report. There is one additional detail I did not present earlier because I wanted to verify it first. He projected a print management record showing that 2 versions of the proposal had been printed within minutes of each other. The original draft had been sent to a secure printer but was never collected. The altered version had been printed from the same laptop using the administrative session and picked up almost immediately. Ryan continued. The printer requires employee badge authentication before releasing confidential documents. The badge used belongs to Daniel Brooks. No one spoke for several long moments. Daniel lowered his eyes toward the table. The room no longer felt like a place where someone was trying to win an argument. It felt like a place where avoiding the truth had finally become impossible. Michael remained composed. Daniel, this company can work through honest mistakes. What becomes much harder is rebuilding trust after intentional deception. I am giving you one opportunity to tell us exactly what happened. Daniel took a deep breath before quietly admitting that he had changed the printed copy because he believed making me appear careless would weaken my chances of being assigned to a major client account that he wanted to keep under his control. He insisted that he never expected the issue to grow beyond a brief, embarrassing moment in the lobby. The admission filled the room with a heavy silence that words could not immediately replace. Linda carefully documented the statement, while Karen closed her notebook without saying a single unnecessary sentence. Michael looked disappointed more than angry. Competition can improve performance, he said. Undermining colleagues destroys organizations. After a short private discussion with Human Resources, Michael informed Daniel that he would be placed on administrative leave while the company completed its formal review under established policy. Daniel quietly gathered his belongings and left the room without looking at anyone. As the door closed behind him, Michael turned toward me again. Ethan, I also owe you an apology. We cannot control every individual's choices, but we are responsible for creating an environment where evidence is valued above assumptions. I thanked him and assured him that my focus remained on serving our clients and supporting the team. As the meeting concluded, Karen asked me to remain behind for a few additional minutes. Once everyone else had left, she smiled for the first time in days and placed another folder on the table. There is something else we discovered during this review, she said quietly. It has nothing to do with Daniel, but it may change the direction of your career far sooner than either of us expected. Karen waited until the hallway outside the executive conference room became quiet before sliding the folder across the table. I opened it expecting another report connected to the investigation, but instead I found performance reviews, client feedback summaries, and several handwritten notes from senior managers I had worked with during the past 3 years. Every page described the same qualities using different words. Reliable, thorough, calm under pressure, trusted by clients. I looked up with a puzzled expression. Karen smiled. These documents were collected over the past 6 months as part of a leadership evaluation process. We had not told you because we wanted to observe your work without changing your behavior. I glanced back at the folder, suddenly understanding why several executives had asked unusually detailed questions during recent meetings. They had not been testing my technical knowledge alone. They had been evaluating how I handled responsibility. Karen continued. This week's events accelerated our review, not because of what happened to you, but because of how you responded. I remained quiet, unsure where the conversation was leading. She folded her hands on the table. You had multiple opportunities to embarrass Daniel publicly after the evidence became clear. You did not. You stayed focused on facts instead of revenge. That is not something we can teach in a training seminar. Before I could answer, there was a light knock on the open door. Michael Reynolds stepped back into the room, carrying a coffee mug. I hope I am not interrupting. Karen smiled. Perfect timing. Michael sat across from me and looked directly into my eyes. The company will complete its formal review according to policy, so I cannot discuss every detail involving Daniel. What I can discuss is our future. He paused briefly before continuing. Next quarter, we are launching a new client strategy division. Karen recommended your name several months ago, and after everything we have reviewed this week, I agree with her recommendation. For a moment, I wondered if I had misunderstood him. Michael noticed my expression and laughed softly. You look like someone who expected another problem instead of an opportunity. I admitted that the thought had crossed my mind. He nodded. That is understandable after the week you have had. The position would involve leading cross-functional project teams, mentoring newer analysts, and presenting directly to major clients across several states. It represented the largest professional opportunity one had ever been offered. I thanked both of them sincerely, but also asked for time to review the responsibilities carefully before accepting. Michael's smile widened. Another reason we chose you. The people most prepared for leadership usually think carefully before saying yes. News travels quickly inside any workplace, but official announcements travel much more slowly. For the rest of the afternoon, almost nobody knew what had happened upstairs. Employees simply noticed that Daniel's office remained empty and that senior managers moved quietly between meetings. Melissa stopped by my desk near the end of the day. Everything all right? She asked. I smiled. I think it will be. She looked relieved. I am glad. You deserved a fair chance. Her words stayed with me long after she returned to her desk. A fair chance. That was all anyone really wanted. Not guaranteed success. Not special treatment. Just the opportunity to be judged by the truth instead of the loudest voice in the room. The following morning, an email from Human Resources informed employees that Daniel was no longer handling active client accounts, and that his responsibilities would be reassigned temporarily while internal procedures continued. The message included no accusations and offered no unnecessary details. It focused on maintaining business continuity and respecting employee privacy. I appreciated that approach. Organizations reveal their values not only by how they celebrate success, but also by how they handle difficult situations. Later that afternoon, Karen invited me to join a planning session for the new strategy division, even though I had not yet formally accepted the position. As we discussed future projects, I noticed how naturally everyone included my ideas in the conversation. There was no hesitation, no lingering doubt from the rumors that had filled the office only days earlier. Trust, once restored through evidence and consistent actions, often becomes stronger than it was before. Just as the meeting ended, Karen received a phone call from Linda in Human Resources. She listened quietly for a minute before thanking her and ending the call. Karen turned toward me with a thoughtful expression. The review has been completed faster than expected, she said. There is one final development you should know before the company shares it with everyone tomorrow morning. And I think it may surprise you even more than everything that has happened so far. Karen closed the conference room door before speaking, as though she wanted to make sure the conversation remained private until the appropriate time. She sat across from me with the same calm expression she had maintained throughout the entire week, but this time there was a sense of quiet optimism behind her words. Human Resources completed the formal review this afternoon, she said. Daniel submitted his resignation before the process reached its final stage. I remained silent for a moment. After everything that had happened, I expected to feel satisfaction. Instead, I mostly felt relief. The uncertainty that had settled over the office for days was finally coming to an end. Karen seemed to understand my reaction immediately. "You are not celebrating," she observed. I shook my head. "There is nothing to celebrate. Someone made a series of poor decisions, and now everyone has to deal with the consequences." She smiled slightly. "That answer confirms we made the right decision about your future." The following morning, the entire department gathered for a regularly scheduled staff meeting. Normally, these meetings focused on sales numbers, upcoming projects, and client updates, but the atmosphere felt noticeably different. Conversations were quieter than usual as employees took their seats. Michael Reynolds stepped to the front of the room and thanked everyone for attending. He explained that recent events had reminded the leadership team of the importance of accountability, transparency, and professional respect. Without mentioning unnecessary personal details, he informed everyone that Daniel was no longer employed by the company and asked employees to avoid speculation or gossip out of respect for everyone involved. His message lasted only a few minutes, but it set the tone for everything that followed. Then Michael surprised the room by inviting me to join him at the front. I had expected the announcement later in the month after I formally accepted the position, but apparently leadership had decided there was no reason to wait. Michael looked around the room before speaking again. "During the past several years, Ethan Carter has consistently demonstrated integrity, sound judgment, and a commitment to supporting both clients and colleagues. Effective immediately, he has accepted the role of Director of Client Strategy." For a second, the room remained completely still. Then applause began from the back of the room. Melissa was among the first to clap, followed quickly by Karen and several team members I had worked beside for years. The applause was not loud or dramatic. It felt genuine, and somehow that made it mean even more. After the meeting, dozens of coworkers stopped by my desk throughout the day. Some congratulated me on the promotion. Others admitted they had doubted the rumors from the beginning, but had not known how to speak up. One employee quietly apologized for assuming the worst before all the facts were available. I thanked each person sincerely because I understood how easy it is for uncertainty to influence judgment. Later that afternoon, I received an unexpected phone call from an important client whose account had originally been connected to the altered proposal. She told me she had heard about my promotion through Michael and wanted to congratulate me personally. Then she said something I would never forget. "The reason our company continues doing business with yours is not because people never make mistakes. It is because your leadership proved they care about the truth." Her words stayed with me long after the call ended. Reputation is built one decision at a time, especially when no one is watching. Over the next several weeks, I settled into my new responsibilities. The work became more demanding, but it also became more meaningful. Instead of focusing only on my own assignments, I helped newer employees develop their skills, encouraged open communication during meetings, and made a point of recognizing good work publicly. I wanted people to feel safe asking questions before small problems became large ones. One afternoon, Melissa stopped by my office after finishing a presentation. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Of course." She smiled. "How did you stay so calm when everyone believed the wrong story?" I thought carefully before answering. "Because I knew I could not control what people assumed. I could only control whether my actions gave the truth enough time to catch up." She nodded thoughtfully before leaving my office. As I watched the door close, I realized the hardest week of my career had quietly become the most valuable lesson of it. I believed the story had finally reached its conclusion, but before the month ended, an envelope arrived at reception with my name written across the front in familiar handwriting, and the sender's name made me stop before opening it. For several seconds, I simply looked at the envelope resting on my desk. The handwriting was unmistakable. Daniel Brooks had written my name across the front with the same neat, deliberate style I had seen on countless client notes over the years. There was no company logo and no return address beyond a local post office box. I turned the envelope over in my hands before carefully opening it. Inside was a single handwritten letter folded into thirds. I unfolded it slowly and began reading. Daniel wrote that he understood I had no reason to respond and that he was not asking for anything. He admitted that after leaving the company, he had spent several weeks replaying every decision that had led to his resignation. He described how his desire to protect his position had gradually become more important than doing what was right. According to his letter, The altered proposal had not been a sudden impulse, but the final step in a series of increasingly poor choices that began when he started measuring his own success by whether someone else advanced. He apologized without making excuses. He did not blame pressure, company culture, or unrealistic goals. Instead, he accepted responsibility for his actions and acknowledged that they had affected more than one person. The final paragraph surprised me the most. He thanked me for refusing to humiliate him after the truth came out. He wrote that if I had chosen public revenge, he probably would have spent the rest of his life convincing himself he had been the victim. My restraint had forced him to face something much more difficult, himself. I set the letter on my desk and stared out the window overlooking the parking lot. Cars came and went as employees continued their ordinary workday. Completely unaware that a chapter one thought had already ended had quietly reopened in a different way. Later that afternoon, Karen stopped by my office to review plans for an upcoming client presentation. She noticed the letter beside my notebook. "Everything all right?" she asked. I nodded and briefly explained where it had come from. She did not ask to read it. Instead, she simply asked, "How are you feeling about it?" I considered the question carefully. "Relieved," I finally answered. Not because of the apology itself, but because it sounds genuine. Karen smiled thoughtfully. Sometimes accountability begins only after the consequences become real. Before leaving, she added one more observation. Forgiveness and trust are not always the same thing. One can exist without the other. Her words stayed with me for the rest of the day. That evening, I took the letter home instead of throwing it away. I placed it inside a desk drawer, not as a reminder of what had happened, but as a reminder of what unchecked ambition can slowly become if character stops guiding success. During the following weeks, our new client strategy division continued growing. We hired 2 additional analysts, expanded relationships with several long-term clients, and launched a mentoring program for recent graduates joining the company. Melissa volunteered to help organize the program, and watching her confidence grow reminded me that workplaces become stronger when experienced employees invest in people instead of competing against them. One Friday afternoon, Michael Reynolds invited me into his office after a leadership meeting. He thanked me for the progress our team had made and then handed me a familiar folder. Inside were the original performance evaluations Karen had shown me weeks earlier. Michael smiled. "There is one comment in here that I think you should read again." I found the highlighted sentence near the bottom of a page written months before any of the recent events had happened. It read, "Ethan consistently elevates the people around him without seeking recognition for himself." Michael leaned back in his chair. That observation was written long before anyone imagined this situation. Character usually reveals itself in ordinary moments before it is tested during extraordinary ones. As I left his office, I realized the promotion had never been the true reward. The real reward was earning the confidence of people who valued integrity above appearances. I believed life at the office had finally settled into a new routine, but the following Monday morning the receptionist called my extension and quietly said, "Ethan, there is someone in the lobby asking if you would be willing to speak with him for just 5 minutes." And when she told me the visitor's name, I understood that some conversations cannot be finished with a letter alone. When I stepped into the lobby, Daniel was standing near the reception desk with his hands loosely folded in front of him. He looked different from the man who had once commanded every room with effortless confidence. It was not his clothes or appearance that had changed. It was the absence of certainty. He thanked the receptionist as I approached and immediately made something clear. "I will only take 5 minutes," he said. "If you decide to walk away before that, I will understand." I nodded toward a quiet seating area near the windows, and we sat across from each other. For a few seconds, neither of us spoke. Finally, Daniel broke the silence. "I wanted to apologize in person because a letter felt incomplete." His voice was calm, without the polished confidence I remembered from countless meetings. "You deserved better from me, and so did everyone else." I listened without interrupting. There was nothing to gain from rushing the conversation. Daniel explained that after leaving the company, he had accepted temporary consulting work while attending professional coaching sessions recommended by a former mentor. During those conversations, he began recognizing how long he had tied his sense of worth to outperforming everyone around him. Success had slowly stopped being about doing excellent work. It had become about making sure nobody else received opportunities he wanted. "I convinced myself that I was protecting my career," he admitted. Looking back, I was actually destroying it one decision at a time. I appreciated that he spoke about his own choices instead of blaming circumstances. Personal responsibility carries more weight than carefully chosen excuses. After a brief pause, he reached into a folder and handed me a printed recommendation. I am not asking for a job, he said quickly. A nonprofit organization that helps high school students prepare for careers asked if I would volunteer to speak about ethical decision-making in the workplace. They wanted references from people who know what happened. I already told them they should contact the company instead of relying on me. I looked over the document without saying anything immediately. It was an unusual request, not because he wanted to volunteer, but because he intended to use his own mistakes as part of the lesson. Why do you want to do this? I finally asked. Daniel answered without hesitation. Because I spent years presenting myself as someone who always had the right answers. Maybe the most useful thing I can offer now is an honest explanation of how small compromises become serious failures if nobody stops them early. His answer felt sincere. I could not guarantee what the future held for him, but I believe people should be judged not only by whether they regret their mistakes, but also by whether they consistently change afterward. I told him I appreciated the apology and wished him well. I also explained that rebuilding trust would take time and would ultimately depend on his future actions rather than our conversation. He nodded in complete agreement. I expected that, he said. Thank you for hearing me anyway. We shook hands before he quietly left the building. I watched through the lobby windows as he walked across the parking lot without looking back. The meeting lasted less than 10 minutes. Yet it closed a chapter that had remained unfinished in my mind. Later that afternoon, I shared the conversation with Karen and Michael. Neither of them seemed surprised. Michael listened carefully before saying something that stayed with me for a long time. Accountability is measured over months and years, not moments. If he truly changes, that will benefit every place he works from now on. The weeks that followed brought welcome normalcy. Our team successfully completed several major client projects. Employee satisfaction scores improved, and the mentoring program expanded faster than anyone expected. Melissa became one of its strongest advocates, organizing monthly workshops where experienced employees openly discussed both successes and mistakes. The culture inside the office slowly shifted toward something healthier. People asked more questions, documented decisions more carefully, and became noticeably more willing to help one another instead of competing for recognition. One afternoon, while reviewing quarterly performance reports, Karen stopped outside my office with a smile. "Do you remember what you told me after the investigation?" she asked. I thought for a moment before answering. That I only wanted the facts to be examined before conclusions were made. She nodded. That sentence has become part of our leadership training materials. I laughed in surprise, assuming she was joking, but she handed me the printed presentation. There, on one of the opening slides, was the principle that would now be shared with every new manager joining the company. A simple reminder that patience, evidence, and integrity should always come before assumptions. And seeing those words made me realize that the most meaningful victories are often the ones that quietly improve life for people you may never even meet. Nearly a year passed before I fully understood that the most important moments in a career are rarely the ones announced in company emails or celebrated in conference rooms. They are the quiet decisions that shape the way people remember you long after a difficult season has ended. The client strategy division continued growing beyond anyone's expectations. We expanded into new markets, welcomed talented employees from across the country, and developed a reputation for solving complicated problems through collaboration instead of competition. Whenever new team members joined us, I always spent time explaining that technical skills could open doors, but character determined how long those doors stayed open. The lesson was no longer something I had learned from a training manual. It had become part of my own experience. One autumn afternoon, Melissa stopped by my office carrying a folder filled with mentoring reports. She smiled as she placed them on my desk. "You should read the comments from the new hires," she said. After she left, I opened the folder and found dozens of anonymous responses. Many praised the supportive environment. Others mentioned how comfortable they felt asking questions without worrying about embarrassment. One comment stood out above all the others. It read, "This is the first workplace where I believe people want me to succeed instead of worrying that I might replace them." I leaned back in my chair and smiled because those words described exactly the kind of culture we had hoped to build. A few weeks later, Michael Reynolds announced his retirement after more than 3 decades with the company. During his farewell gathering, he thanked employees for their dedication and reflected on the organization's history. Before concluding his remarks, he surprised everyone by asking me to stand. When leaders retire, he said, people often ask what legacy matters most. It is not a building, a product, or a quarterly report. It is leaving the organization in the hands of people who understand that integrity is not a slogan. It is a daily decision. I felt genuinely humbled by his confidence. After the meeting ended, Michael handed me a small framed photograph taken during the opening of the company's first office many years earlier. On the back, he had written a short message in his own handwriting. Protect trust first. Success will follow. I placed that photograph in my office where I could see it every day. Several months after Michael's retirement, I received another unexpected message. It was a brief email from Daniel. He did not ask for a recommendation or a favor. Instead, he shared that he had completed nearly a year of volunteer work with a nonprofit organization, speaking to students and young professionals about ethical leadership and personal accountability. He wrote that every presentation began with the same sentence. One poor decision can take only a minute to make, but rebuilding trust takes far longer. I wished him well and hoped he would continue proving those words through consistent actions. We never became close friends, but we no longer carried unresolved bitterness. Life had moved forward for both of us. Looking back now, I realized the story was never really about an altered proposal or a promotion. Those events simply revealed something that had been true all along. Every workplace eventually presents moments when shortcuts appear easier than honesty, when assumptions spread faster than evidence, and when pride whispers that winning matters more than doing what is right. In those moments, people reveal who they truly are. I could not control another person's choices, but I learned that I always controlled my own response. Remaining calm did not make the truth arrive faster, yet it allowed the truth to arrive without being buried beneath anger. Choosing professionalism did not erase the difficulty of the situation, but it protected my credibility while the facts caught up. Most importantly, treating another person with dignity after they had failed did not excuse their behavior. It simply ensured that my own character was not shaped by resentment. Even today, whenever I walk through the lobby where everything began, I sometimes pause for a moment before heading to my office. Employees greet one another, clients arrive for meetings, and new careers quietly begin without knowing the history of that ordinary Tuesday. I prefer it that way because the greatest lessons do not need to be repeated every day. They only need to be remembered by the people who live them. If this experience taught me anything, it is that reputation can be questioned, success can change, and circumstances can shift without warning, but integrity remains the one investment that continues paying dividends long after every rumor has disappeared.